This Aries new moon is about to shake things up, and the best advice I can give you without fear-mongering you is to breathe deeply through all the discomfort and to prepare yourself for the worst while also striving to co-create the best. Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Hummingbird Arcana Podcast. I'm Jo Hummingbird. I'm an Evolutionary Astrologer, Usui Reiki Master, and a Tarot and Oracle Specialist. I'm here to awaken you to your Cosmic Divinity, and today I'm bringing you an episode all about the Aries new moon that we have upcoming on Friday, April 17th. This is the first new moon of the Zodiacal New Year, so obviously we had the Zodiacal New Year start when we had the full moon in Libra a couple weeks ago, a couple weeks in a couple days, give or take. But with that being said, I hope everybody's new year from a zodiacal standpoint is off to an all right start. Obviously, on a global level, we are not doing so hot, but this new moon definitely won't change that. It seems like we're going to have some tension, even more so than we've already had. This is also a new moon I've had my eyes on since October of last year in 2025. So not to fearmonger, not to worry you, not to add any more stress to your plate, but this isn't going to be a fun one. So with that being said, grab a snack, grab your favorite drink, breathe deeply, and let's break down this Aries new moon. Curious to see how this Aries new moon will activate your natal chart and influence your energy? Go ahead and check out my lunar luminosity reading then. I'll help you look into how this new moon will be personally impacting you, along with the insight on how to integrate the energies of it on the day before, day of, and day after. This is the perfect reading to get if you want to align your life with the natural cycles of the moon and work with her astrological archetypes. So head to the link in the description box or in the show notes below to book a lunar luminosity reading of your very own. Now, back to Hummingbird Arcana. So like I mentioned in the pre-intro, this is the first new moon of the Zodiacal New Year, and this does happen on Friday, April 17th at exactly 6:51 a.m. in Central Standard Time. Do the time conversion for your own time zones, of course, but with where I'm at and where I'm at in the world, this is the time that it'll be happening. So there's a lot to talk about. There are so many aspects. There is so much loaded Martian energy within this Aries season alone, let alone this new moon. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, grab your snack, grab your drink, get comfy, breathe deeply, and we're going to break this down as much as we can without introducing a bunch of fear. There are going to be, a lot of points of contention, a lot of points of density, a lot of unpredictability, a lot of chaos in this new moon from what I've been keeping my eyes on for 6 months plus at this point. But that's not to say that everything is going to go to shit and that the world is over. This is just saying that the old world, as we know it, is done. And this new moon is going to kind of put the nails into that coffin, so to speak. So let's start off easy. Let's talk about just the sun and the moon because these are the two key players into every new moon cycle and every full moon cycle, that being said. But the sun is exalted in Aries, and we have the sun and moon in Aries at 27 degrees. Now, with the sun being exalted here, this brings about a more confident sense of self, a little bit more of exuberance in an egotistical standpoint in the shadow frequency. This can be a lot of people finally having the gumption and the audacity to do things, whether good or bad. However, with the moon being in Aries, this is a debility for the moon because the moon is always debilitated in Martian energy. It is technically also in fall over in Scorpio, which is another Mars-ruled sign. So that then henceforth puts the moon into a debilitation within any form of Martian energy, especially the Plutonian Martian energy of Scorpio. But I digress. We're not over there. We're in the Martian Aries side of things. We're not in the Martian Scorpio side of things. Now this happens at, like I said, 27 degrees of Aries. And this degree of Aries is in the third decan, which if you don't know about the decans, there's an episode of that coming out. I will link it on the screen and in the description box or in the show notes once that episode is live. But the decans are the 3 sets of 10 degrees that make up the whole 30 degrees of every single zodiac sign, if you're going based off of the whole sign system, of course. So with that being said, 27 degrees is in that last set of 10 between 20 or 21 and 30. So with that being said, the last decan in Aries is governed by the planet Jupiter. And for the moon to be here, the moon is the ruler of Cancer. And what's going on in Cancer right now? We have Jupiter over there in Cancer. Now, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so Jupiter energy is very happy to see the moon, to see lunarian essence. But when it's over in Aries, where the moon is debilitated, especially by that Martian energy, this is a recipe for the exacerbation of that debilitation, if that doesn't sound too convoluted. This brings an expansion of bigger than our body is ability to, or has an ability to capacitate with emotional processing, with the way that our emotions feel. They can be very aggrandized, they can be very dramatized, especially with the sun being there and the sun being exalted, that egoic sense of confidence, depending on the enlightened or shadow frequency it's operating from for you or for other people. This can bring about a sense of like, okay, well, I feel emotionally disturbed, so I'm going to take it out outside of me, or I'm going to, be kind of arrogant, and I'm going to be a little bit even more just ignorant rather than arrogant even. So the combination here of the sun and moon in Aries is not always the most fun. It can be very unconsciously messy. It can be, as much as it's like really good to have that exalted sun of confidence and clarity and even just determination and ambition, that moon debilitation really does not help. It's very much like, okay, well, I have all this confidence and I have all this drive, but I also feel like shit, and I also feel like it's everybody else's fault and it's not mine. And why, victimhood, 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 because Aries is the sign of the newborn. It is the first sign in the zodiac. It is a fire sign, and it, again, is the youngest of all the fire signs, let alone all the signs. So when the moon is in Aries, whether that's a natal position, a transit, a progression, what have you, this is about learning the most basic and fundamental emotional lessons. It's not easy. It's not fun. It can seem like in the shadow frequency, I don't throw this term around for sake of it, being aggrandized by the pop world or, misused in certain psychological spaces online, but it can lean towards the narcissistic spectrum a lot. Not that every person who has moon in Aries is a narcissist. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the moon in Aries presents a lot of narcissistic lessons to be learned, because every human has those tendencies in certain contexts to some level on some form of the spectrum somewhere. There's no person in the world that is literally 0% narcissistic at all. That we all have a human ego, we have to survive, we all individualize ourselves somehow, and there's no really any way to get around that for the most part. It's just the fault of being human. And with that being said, the sun and the moon here together, that sun lights up and the moon reflects the sun's light. We obviously know this, but when they're in the same spot, that creates obviously a new moon. So there is no light being reflected. It's just this dark void place. So the sun is lighting up all of that voided energy. It's lighting up the density of that experience. It's lighting up the unconsciousness rather than bringing light to the things that we need to have consciousness for. It can be super messy, especially in that sign of Aries with that moon being debilitated. Now, that's not the only thing we have going on with just the sun and the moon. We also have Chiron, the wounded healer, with a direct conjunction with the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon, like we mentioned, are at 27 degrees, and Chiron is at 26 degrees Aries. Now, Chiron being the wounded healer, this is the archetype of martyrdom, and it is the complex of everybody else but me is able to do this. Or I can do this for everybody else but myself. It's that nuanced, dualistic conversation. It's two sides of the same coin of just the inability to do something for oneself, but the capacity to either watch other people do it for themselves or for you to be able to do it for other people and perceivably not for yourself. So with the sun and the moon, the ego and the unconscious lighting up the wounds, this is going to bring a lot to the surface where people are just going to be a lot more wounded. They're going to be operating from the places of their unconscious, unprocessed trauma. They're going to be operating from the places of victimizing themselves and, placing themselves in a position of perceived martyrdom because of what they can or cannot do in regards to the context of themselves and other people. Now, Chiron in and of itself is governed by Saturn and Uranus, but Saturn more so because Saturn does rule Aquarius and Capricorn. Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius, but Saturn is the traditional ruler of both Capricorn and Aquarius. So you have a double entendre with the Aquarius between Saturn and Uranus, but we'll focus more on the Saturn because that is more important in the context of this Aries new moon conversation, because that leads us directly into how Saturn is playing into this new moon, with Saturn being conjunct Neptune, Mercury, and Mars, all at the beginning of Aries in the first decan, which again goes back to that whole 10 set of degrees that are split up 3 ways between each sign. That first set of 10 degrees in Aries is ruled by the planet Mars. So Mars will be happy in its domicile sign of Aries and its domicile decan in that sign, but Saturn in Aries is in its fall position. So not super fun. Saturn being boundaries, karma, discipline, time lord, karma, in extreme cases, death. But with that being said, it being the ruler of Chiron as well, this is bringing a lot of the fall to those wounds. It's bringing a lot of the victimhood and a lot of the patriarchy's influence on the quote-unquote helplessness that we experience with Chiron, especially with Neptune being here, the dissolver of everything. This is going to, already with what Saturn and Neptune have been doing in Aries, dissolve the delusions of the patriarchy and dissolve the illusions of the patriarchy's influence on the leadership and the self and the ability to take action. But with that Chiron influence from Saturn's fall position in Aries, with Chiron also in Aries, in the Jupiter decan of expansion, conjunct the moon, unconsciousness, conjunct the sun, conscious ego self-awareness, this is like a hyper exacerbation of all of that energy. This will feel debilitating to the nervous system. Not even just like, oh no, my wounds are getting to me, my social anxiety, my depression, fill in the blank with whatever, would hinder you on more of a mental level, but this is going to be psychosomatic. This is going to be something that is seemingly immovable because Saturn, again, is restriction and boundaries and discipline, and it can cut things off whenever they are not sustaining life long term, and it can be painful and slow and monotonous and meticulous and annoying as fuck. So with that being said, this isn't a fun recipe, especially with Mars there, the planet of war and aggression, in its domicile sign and decan, conjunct Mercury, the planet of the mind, intellect, mental health even at certain times, conjunct Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, which is isolation and institutionalization. This is not a good recipe, in my opinion. I mean, if you have a lot of Aries energy in your chart, you will be going through it, right? If you haven't already during this Aries season with how chaotic it has been in and of the world, let alone Aries season and the transits themselves, you will be going through it during this Aries new moon, guaranteed, whether it's something that you are experiencing yourself or something that somebody else is inflicting upon you or associating you with. Now, with that being said, that whole Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Neptune conjunction at the beginning of Aries between 2 degrees and 7 degrees will be directly sextiling Pluto in Aquarius. And Pluto in Aquarius is at 5 degrees currently, and will stay there by the time that the new moon happens, because Pluto moves so slow. Pluto being another influence over, scorpionic energy, and that being a Martian ruled sign as well. There's that sort of vague energetic mutual reciprocity there. But Pluto in Aquarius is in its fall position. So we have 2 planets already in fall that are generational planets that we've been talking about for the entirety of 2026 so far. But with Pluto in Aquarius in particular, this is the destruction and rebirth of humanitarianism itself. We have talked about that theme several times through each new and full moon podcast episode, through different astro posts that I've made online. You can check all those out, and I'll probably do like a whole video on Pluto and Aquarius because it is just so important, despite how slow it moves and how insignificant it seems to other astrologers. But With that being said, Pluto is also in that first decan of Aquarius. And again, if you've paid attention to any of the decans, and again, I will have that episode linked whenever it does come out, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But with the first decan of every sign, that first decan is ruled by the planet that rules that sign, if that makes sense. So like with Mars, like we mentioned, that first decan is ruled by Mars, or with Aries, excuse me, that first decan is ruled by Mars. Taurus, that first decan is ruled by Venus. Mercury, the first decan is ruled by Mercury. Or Gemini, excuse me, I'm getting the planets and the signs mixed up here. There's a lot to talk about. And so on and so forth through every single one of the signs. The planet that rules them will also rule their first decan in that sign. So with Aquarius, Uranus rules the first decan of Aquarius. And Pluto, being in fall in Aquarius, in the decan of the planet that rules Aquarius, this is shaking shit up. This is not an easy time. This is, the most volatile and chaotic decan that Aquarius has to offer, because the others are going to be Mercury and Venus later on. So it kind of softens as you move through the rest of Aquarius, and it starts out with a bang. And with that being said, Pluto being, death, rebirth, destruction, psychology, sexuality, the taboo, the esoterica of it all, this is the death of those things in the context as it relates over to the sextile of that hyperconjunction between Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune in Aries. It's no secret that there are tons of AI bots or snake oil scammers out there who want to take advantage of your innocence and your wallet when it comes to seeking spiritual guidance. Especially with all of the fear-mongering that happens in today's world, it can be so challenging to navigate the intricacies of our own spiritual journeys, not to mention to be choosing a reader or a practitioner that you actually resonate with before having to pay to work with them. That's why I offer a free 30-minute discovery call where together we can discuss what kind of guidance you're looking for, what your budget looks like, and most importantly, to see if we're actually a good fit for each other before you ever have to hand any money over to work with me one-on-one. So head to the link in the description box or in the show notes below to book your own free discovery call today to see for yourself if I can be of service for you on your path. I'm so excited to get to meet with you, and now back to Hummingbird Arcana. So sextiling is kind of this, it's supportive. It's not in the way that a trine would be supportive, but it's this supportive like tension. It's like this friction that creates some sort of a growth forward. It's almost like when you have a plant growing and you want it to grow a little bit differently or faster or in a more healthy way, you trim some of the leaves off, like a pothos or an ivy. You would cut some of the leaves off to make cutlings of it, and you can grow more of the plants, yes. But then in that area, it will force that plant to then have to adapt and grow in different ways that it wouldn't naturally be doing if you wouldn't have cut it off. And so the sextile is kind of like the trimming and pruning of plants, where it's like it's for the greater good, supposedly, but it does not seem like it in the moment, and it fucking hurts and sucks right then and there. So with that being said, this whole sextile between Pluto and that Mercury, Mars, Saturn, Neptune conjunction in Aries, with Aquarius and Aries as signs, they do sextile each other. So there is that sexual tension type energy between the two, not from like a strictly not like a horny standpoint. It can be, but it's not necessarily that. It can be the generative life force type thing. Again, refer to the plant analogy. Aquarius being the humanitarianism, Aries being the warriorship and the leadership. Between those two, with Mercury the mind, Mars the war, Saturn the restriction, and Neptune the dissolution, and then Pluto being over there in Aquarius with the destruction, this is directly a reflection of what we are watching happen in the world right now. We are watching world leaders who we thought we could believe in fucking fall apart because they're secretly evil, or we're watching people be held accountable in certain ways and progress actually being made in other parts of the world. Great. There's two sides to every coin, and they are still the same coin. This is still the same issue. It's just depending on how the energy is being channeled, how people are collectively working with this, Aquarius being the collective humanity energy and Aries being the self-individual. How are these individuals contributing to the collective to then actually get something done, to utilize the medicine of these placements and transits rather than the shadow frequencies of them, how we're seeing, in the United States and Israel and a few other places in the world, but more so in those two than anywhere else. So with that being said, there's one more aspect that I want to talk about here. And it's not an aspect directly to the moon, but it is an aspect, period. Now, Venus is over in Taurus. We talked about that in the Libra full moon video and podcast episode because that is the ruler of that moon, and that is a very important planet to talk about in that context. But Venus will be in the last decan of Taurus, which is, again, her home sign. But Uranus is there as well at 29 degrees, which is the anaretic degree. And with that being said, the last decan of Taurus is ruled by Saturn. And this is not the fun decan of Taurus. The Venus first decan, the Mercury second decan, those are a little bit easier and more, I don't want to say lighthearted for the sake of spiritual bypassing, but they're more creative, they're more expressive, they're more in flow and in harmony and in balance, versus the Saturn side of Taurus, which is where you get that kind of archetype of Taurus being stubborn and hard to move and quote unquote the shadow frequency lazy. But with that being said, Uranus, the planet of chaos, disruption, unpredictability, unconventionality, and then Venus, the ruling sign of Taurus, this is bringing a little bit of harmony back into that shakeup that Uranus wants to give. And with Uranus being in Taurus at the 29th degree, the anaretic degree, Uranus being the ruler of Aquarius, that creates an energy square to its natal ruler, this is a huge challenge. This is Taurus's ruler of Venus giving a challenge to humanitarianism, to that Pluto and Aquarius aspect, because its ruler is over here in Taurus's hometown being like, hey, you're on my turf, you're going to play by my rules, what now, bitch? That's kind of how Taurus is going to get when we're in the Saturnian decan of Taurus rather than the Venusian or the Mercurial. So in that context, to circle back to the themes of what this is doing, this is putting tensions at an all-time high. This Aries new moon is about to shake things up, and the best advice I can give you without fear-mongering is to breathe deeply through the discomfort and to prepare yourself for the worst while striving to co-create the best. That doesn't mean that you have to give up on all of your dreams. It doesn't mean that you have to let go of literally every single thing you thought you ever knew in order to find any form of happiness or sanity. That just means we have to let go of the old world order, because this new moon is the tipping point for that. Whether it's from a physical standpoint or from an energetic standpoint, this is the tipping point for it. The pressure is building and the pot is going to boil over at some point. If you're cooking on high and you have a bunch of water and it's boiling and boiling and boiling and you just have the lid sitting on it, it will boil over at some point and you have to take the lid off to let the steam out. We're at the point where something is about to boil over and we're going to have to lift the lid up, or we're about to make a lot of noise and a little bit of a mess in the kitchen. And not that the kitchen wasn't already messy from a metaphorical standpoint, let's be so fucking for real. So breathe through the tension, breathe through the discomfort, strive to co-create the best while preparing for the worst. This is a time to learn any practical skills or any, mundane things that you can trade and barter with that are of value to yourself or other people. This isn't like a time to necessarily be like, oh my God, stocks and crypto and like digital, fuck out of here with that. Not that that isn't, if you're finding a way to do that with integrity, cool, good for you. But most of the time, that kind of a thing has zero integrity. And especially with this new moon, this is dissolving all those things that are not in integrity or not in alignment with the best for humanity. Obviously, we are watching so many things that are horrific and awful happen to humanity right now. But that does not mean there won't be any accountability long term. Saturn's in the first decan of Aries right now. And once it moves through that sun-ruled decan in the middle and goes into that Jupiter decan at the end in a few years, give or take, after some retrogrades and whatnot, we'll be watching the long-term consequences of the actions that the corrupt leaders and politicians and big tech billionaires and money launderers are doing right now. We will watch that fall apart in a very grand way. Now, if you are feeling a little bit nervous about this new moon, I totally understand, because I have been, like I mentioned, watching this new moon specifically since October of last year, and I've been keeping my eyes on it very, very closely. This is not a new moon to be singing Kumbaya by a campfire, for praying for world peace, or to be dancing in fucking frog costumes at a protest that's quote unquote peaceful. We need to be responding to what is happening with equivocal force. Not in the sense that we need to just fucking drop everything and everyone in our lives and just go start rioting in the streets. But that doesn't mean that there isn't anything productive that can be done that is also holding a consequence towards those who are destroying our world at our own expense. So, with that being said, if you are interested in seeing how this new moon is going to affect you in particular on the day of, the day before, and the day after this new moon, then I will link down below in the description box the link to book a lunar luminosity reading with me. I'll give you insight on how to integrate all this energy, again, like I said, for the day before, day of, and day after this new moon, and what would be best astrologically for you to do during this time. For me personally, in my chart, the best thing for me to do is to get my groceries a few days before this new moon and to stay inside and focus on me speaking out politically online, and to focus on my craft and educating people about astrology, uplifting them with the tools and resources that I have in my arsenal. And it's not for me to be out there fucking fighting because I'm in another country right now. It's not affecting my country, thank goddess. It's affecting my home country, and that really fucking sucks. But I can't do anything physically in my home country if I'm not there. What I can do is promote people online who are speaking out. I can repost their content. I can share their mutual aid funds. I can be outspoken as much as I can about the corrupt shit that's happening. And I encourage you to find the things that you can do within your power to make a difference. Because if one person in their room says, I can't do anything, and they do nothing about it, times 8 billion people across the whole world, then we will not be able to do anything about it. But if you have the courage to do even something small that then leads into something bigger, or the inspiration for someone else to do something bigger, then that is enough impact, and that will elicit change. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and leave it here. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Hummingbird Arcana Podcast. If you enjoyed or resonated with anything I had to say in this episode and you're watching on YouTube, then let me know by liking the video, subscribing to my channel, and turning on that post notification bell so you're notified every time a new episode comes out. And if you're listening instead of watching on a streaming platform, then hi, hello. How are you? I would humbly implore you to rate and leave a review for the podcast. Let me know in the comment section of that review what you're looking forward to in the year of 2026 from an astrological standpoint, any ideas for future episodes, or any future guests you would like me to have on the podcast. So with that being said, I will leave it here. Thank you again for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode of Hummingbird Arcana. I'm Jo Hummingbird. It is my greatest honor and privilege to assist you in awakening you to your cosmic divinity. Many blessings, and take care, my beautiful friends.